Welcome back, everyone. So, in today's explainer, we are diving into an absolutely massive question. Who actually runs the world? Now, political scientist Ian Bremmer argues that, well, it's really not as simple as it used to be. We're going to explore some totally eye-opening questions about the nature of leadership, the real impact of our rapidly evolving global order, and honestly, our own choices as participants in the future of democracy. It's a lot, but it's fascinating geopolitics. Let's just jump right in. It all starts with this simple but incredibly profound question: who runs the world? This used to have a really obvious answer. Depending on when you grew up, you probably felt this sense of certainty, right? Like you knew exactly who was in charge and how the globe was organized. But as we're going to see today, the answer to this question has literally turned upside down in just the last few decades. Just think about the historical comfort zone you grew up in. Like, if you're over 45, you lived in a bipolar world. You had the US calling the shots on one side of the wall and the Soviets on the other. Now, if you're under 45, you grew up in a unipolar world. The US was the sole dominant superpower, the big boss. But about 15 years ago, things got really complicated. The US kind of stepped back, other nations started flat out ignoring the rules, and we arrived at where we are today, the leaderless world. So how on earth did we get here? Well, Bremmer identifies three massive triggers. First off, Russia was left out of Western institutions. They're a former great power in decline, and frankly, they're angry. Second, China integrated into US-led institutions, but, and this is key, they didn't adopt American values like everyone expected them to. And third, millions of everyday citizens in wealthy democracies were just left completely behind by globalization, and they ended up losing faith in their own governments. Now, those three triggers, they're absolutely crucial to understand for one staggering reason: 90%. Let me repeat that. Over 90% of the geopolitical tensions dominating your newsfeed today are caused by those three specific shifts. That right there is exactly why we are currently living in a leaderless world. But here's the thing. A leaderless world? It won't last forever. The old concept of a single global superpower dominating the whole shebang, yeah, that is dead. If we don't have one or two superpowers, we don't have a single global order. Instead, looking at the next 10 years, Bremmer outlines this fascinating blueprint of three different overlapping systems that are actually running our world. The global security order, a unipolar reality. This first framework is all about traditional military might. And honestly, the contrast here is stark. The US is literally the only country on the planet capable of sending troops and equipment to every single corner of the globe. China's growing, for sure, but they're mostly limited to Asia right now. And Russia's military, it's been severely weakened by the invasion of Ukraine. So while nuclear deterrence keeps things, relatively stable, this security order remains strictly unipolar. It is absolutely driven by the US. Now let's look at Order 2, the global economic order, a multipolar reality. Okay, so the rules change completely when we start talking about money instead of weapons. In the global economy, power is heavily shared. It's like a giant puzzle. The US can't just use its military to dictate economic terms anymore. Actually, get this, despite all the intense political friction you hear about, US-China trade relations are currently at historic highs. Crazy, right? Everyone wants US military protection, but they also desperately want access to China's massive market. So throw in the European Union, a rapidly rising India, and a stable Japan, and you can see why this economic order is truly multipolar. And this creates a massive global tug-of-war. On one side, the US uses its security dominance to pull economies closer. Think of the huge battles we're seeing over semiconductors or TikTok. But on the flip side, China uses its commercial dominance to align nations diplomatically. Meanwhile, you've got Europe, India, and Japan constantly balancing the scales. They're making sure neither the security order nor the economic order completely takes over. Which brings us to Order 3, the digital order, the new rulers. Now, this is where things take a major twist. We are seeing an urgent shift away from traditional nation-states. As Ian Bremmer points out, we have to wake up to this shocking reality. The third, and arguably most impactful global order, is not run by governments at all. It is entirely controlled by unregulated private technology companies. And the real-world power these platforms hold, it is staggering. I mean, look at Ukraine. Tech companies literally provided the cyber defense and satellite communications that kept the government online during the invasion. In politics, these tech platforms act as the ultimate gatekeepers. They alone decide if world leaders get to speak to millions unfiltered. And algorithms, they've become the underlying engine for real-world mobilization.
They heavily influence the outcomes of major events like the Capitol riots on January 6th, the trucker protests in Ottawa, and those insurrections in Brazil.
But it gets even more personal than that. You know, growing up, we all believed our identities were shaped by nature and nurture. But today? Actually, scratch that. Today they're shaped by nature, nurture, and algorithm. We have code written by private companies that is fundamentally determining what we think, what we desire, and what we are willing to do to get it. So what does this all mean? Well, when we want to challenge the system today, it's no longer just about questioning authority. We have to question the algorithm itself, and that leaves us staring down a really massive question. What are tech companies going to do with this staggering, completely unprecedented amount of power? Well, that all depends on who these companies decide they actually want to be. Bremmer outlines 3 potential futures for us. First, a technology Cold War, where the digital world essentially splits in 2 based on who aligns with the US versus China. Second is digital globalization, where tech companies manage to maintain a competitive, truly global business model. Or third, and this is a big one, a technopolar order. This is where governments continue to erode, leaving tech companies as the absolute dominant actors. They'd basically be the ones determining whether our future is one of limitless opportunity or, well, zero freedom. And we really need to pay attention here, because Bremmer issues a stark warning. There is no pause button on these explosive, disruptive technologies. They are moving so much faster than our ability to govern them. To put that into perspective, there are already over 100 people globally who have the knowledge and the tech to create a new smallpox virus. I mean, the genie is totally out of the bottle. So we have to start viewing these tech billionaires not just as successful businessmen, but as the most powerful people on Earth. And we have to demand answers. Will they act accountably as they release incredibly powerful AI? What are they going to do with the unprecedented amounts of personal data they've harvested from us? And are they going to persist with advertising models that literally turn citizens into products, models that drive massive revenues just by fueling anger and misinformation? Which brings Bremmer to this really heavy realization. Think back to 1989. When the Berlin Wall fell, the United States was the world's principal exporter of democracy. Now contrast that with today. Bremmer argues that the US has actually become the principal exporter of tools that destroy democracy. It's a wild thought, but the very technology we are exporting is actively undermining the democratic fabric we used to champion. And so we arrive at the most provocative question for the future of global leadership. The leaders who are creating these incredibly powerful tools, are they okay with exporting platforms that erode democracy? Or will they step up and act accountably? You know, as active participants in this rapidly evolving world, it's really up to us to demand that answer. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the system, and I'll catch you next time.